We didn't grow up knowing what executive function skills were. Life felt overwhelming. Managing time, staying organized, and feeling stuck made everything difficult. What we didn't realize was that we lacked the skills to plan, prioritize, and break goals into manageable steps. After years of trial and error, we've seen how powerful executive function skills can be. With expert interviews, real stories, and practical strategies, this podcast is the resource we wish we had. Whether you're a student, parent, or professional, we're here to help you unlock your potential. Welcome to the Executive Function for All podcast. Today we're joined by Hannah Bookbinder. She's the founder of Academic Ally, the author of Unlock Your Inner Superhero, and the creator of the My Toad app. With over 25 years of experience, Hannah specializes in helping students with ADHD and executive function challenges navigate the transition from high school to college. In this episode, Hannah shares her 5 pillars framework to support the transition to college. She also talks about how students can learn to outsmart themselves. This is a great one for any family who is preparing their student for that transition. And let's begin. Hannah, thank you so much for taking the time and being here today.
It's awesome to be here, Brandon. Thanks for having me.
You have a specialty that's near and dear to me. As someone who left home freshman or after high school and just bombed my freshman year, it's something that I really want to dig into, and I love your work around it.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I feel equally passionately about it because, I've worked with a lot of people who just feel completely misunderstood, and that in and of itself is hard. But then when you have to walk the walk and struggle the way that they do sometimes, and also not have the validation and celebration for the things that they're really good at because of ADHD, that's frustrating for them too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, let's jump right in. We know a ton of our students with ADHD or executive function challenges struggle with this transition from high school to college. For a lot of us, it's maybe the biggest jump of our lives. Talk me through your 5 pillars and how you think about this college transition.
So I think that one of the big things to remember about, college is that when you make that transition from high school to college, all of the structures and maybe some of the hand holding and the hovering disappears. And the kids are kind of left to their own devices to fend for themselves. So if they can look at college as not only a time to get an education and figure out what they want to do in the next phase of their lives, but also as an opportunity to form some systems to help them to be successful in spite of or because of all of the packages that come with having ADHD. And with my 5 pillars, the thing that's really important to remember is, and I think that it's critical to point out and make this distinction. These 5 pillars are not just, some friendly tips that I'm handing out. These are these serve as the biological foundation for executive functioning skills. The executive functioning skills live in the part of the brain of the prefrontal cortex, and the prefrontal cortex is very sensitive to sleep, hydration, nutrition, emotional awareness, all of those things, and having some rest and resilience time. All of those things enable the body to do what it needs to do in order to resettle the prefrontal cortex and to kind of equilibrate the neurotransmitters that we have, like the dopamine, serotonin. Dopamine is responsible for the identification of what's important, the initiation of tasks, and the follow through. Serotonin is important for emotional regulation, and the norepinephrine is important for things like focus and really just being able to see things for what they are. And when you give the body with these 5 pillars the opportunity to do what it needs to do, then you're going to be able to overcome some of the challenges that you have with ADHD. Remembering that people who have ADHD don't produce a regular flow of dopamine. It's not that they necessarily have a lack of it. It just doesn't come on a regular basis. So whatever we can do in a behavioral kind of a way to reinforce that supply is going to be helpful. So let's start with the sleep. Sleepy brains are very easy to get dysregulated. When you have a decrease in sleep, you have an increase in cortisol, which is one of the stress hormones. And when your brain is stressed out, You're not going to remember that you have due dates. You're not going to be able to problem solve. You're definitely not going to be able to stay organized, and you're not going to be able to focus. So what can you do to address, sleep? I always encourage my clients of any age, but particularly in college when it's really challenging because you have so many things out there that are tempting, get into a regular sleep hygiene. Maybe you have a sleep hygiene that's important during the week, and that can be altered a little bit on the weekends, which is not me saying in code that people should stay up until 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning and sleep until noon. But having a regular sleep routine is really important because the body needs that. And sleep hygiene includes doing things like putting off those stressful topics to deal with tomorrow. Maybe jot down what you're thinking about and then say, that's a tomorrow thing. Reducing the amount of screen time that you do before sleep, that's always helpful because that backlit light, the blue light, reduces the production of the melatonin that tells your brain it's time to go to sleep. And it tricks it into saying, oh, it's wake up time. And then it's really hard to go to sleep. So, just doing little things like that can help with a sleep routine. Nutrition is really important. The body relies particularly on glucose for energy and protein to produce dopamine. So remembering, like I just said a little while ago, that ADHD, the consistency of dopamine is compromised to begin with. So let's boost it with some high protein foods and meals and snacks. I call them high energy snacks. My family makes fun of me for saying that, but those are some things that are really helpful when it comes to nutrition, because your brain is just like a machine. If it doesn't get proper fuel, it's not going to be able to run effectively. So let's give it protein rich and complex carbohydrates types of fuel to keep it going. Shall I keep going?
Let's take a quick break there. First of all, thank you for starting with the basics.
Yeah.
I think when we talk about the transition, often people are talking about accommodations and certain organizational strategies, and those are important. However, they won't do a whole lot unless you start at the bottom and take care of the basics first. I think sleep is the one thing that scares more parents than anything else, is because we see our teenagers' habits in our homes, and we often try to get them to do the right things, but we're worried they'll do that on their own. What do you tell to parents that have that concern?
Well, it's important to remember that as the kids get older, their sleep cycle is going to change, and they're prone biologically to start sleeping later at night. So I always try to normalize that a little bit for not only the kids, because I have a lot of students coming in and they're just like, they love sleep, but it's so elusive because they're having all these shifts in their body. And I think that it's reassuring also to the parents about knowing that this is just a biological function. But, where it gets to be a little bit slippery is where you have almost night and day reversal. And just like they did when they were infants sometimes, and you sort of have to dial it back a little bit by bit to adjust the bedtime. So for example, if your kid is going to bed at 2 o'clock in the morning, then starting in 15-minute increments, and it's going to take a little while to get them onto a more reasonable sleep schedule. But talking with the family and talking with the student and having them work together on something that is feasible, like some of the strategies that I was talking about before. And it's really important to bring the parents into the conversation as well when it comes to raising issues that are a source of stress. The difficulty with so many students is that they are really busy. They're in sports, they're in their MUN clubs, they're doing all these wonderful and amazing things. Well, they don't get home until late. And the parents in the meantime, hopefully haven't been pounding them with texts in between. And this is the first time the parents are seeing the kids. So that's when they hop on the opportunity to rattle off all these things that they have to say. I'm guilty of that. I had to learn how to stop doing that. So let's schedule a time that's earlier in the day so that we can address some of these things and just keep a list of them so that nobody forgets anything, and have a conversation about those more stressful things so that the evening can be less stressful.
Yeah, those are really, really good insights. And the other thing that I'd like to mention too is that often we see students rebel when they're in high school. senior
Hmm.
year, and parents are
Hmm.
looking at their sleep schedule and they're like, my goodness. How, and then if we give them the education and teach them what like a pre-bedtime routine is, well, surprisingly enough, on their own, they start to take care of it, have the understanding, which you and I probably get worried about.
Yeah, and also help the kids to learn how to read what the language is and the messages are that their bodies are telling them.
Yeah.
That in and of itself is far more powerful than parents harassing them, telling them they need to get into bed. If you're having a hard time getting out of bed, if you're having a hard time focusing, if you're feeling really irritable and that's unusual for you, then those are signals that your body is telling you that something needs to change, and to take a look at what it is that you're doing so that you can figure out, well, yeah, I just realized I've been going to bed every night for the past 3 nights at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I have to get up at 6 to catch the bus. So, if we can teach them now before they launch to start working with their bodies and listening to the communication that's coming, that's huge because that's a lifelong skill.
Absolutely. No, I know you and I both know a lot of adults who struggle with that at the moment, right?
Yeah.
You spoke to sleep and nutrition. What are some of your other pillars?
Hydration. The brain consists of 75% water. So even a 2% decrease in the amount of water that you take in can completely compromise the brain, so that you're again seeing that cortisol spike, and then the kids are getting stressed, and then all the executive functioning skills are going to heck in a handbasket. So I talk a lot about creating a regular routine, and that includes, bring that water bottle along with you. Take advantage of those water stations that are there in the hallways, and you can even have like a reminder on your Apple Watch if you want, or in the app, which I know we're going to talk about later. You can have a system of reminders in place to address some of these things so that they become habit forming. That's an easy fix.
Cool. Cool. What's after hydration?
So after hydration is emotional awareness. If you're walking around with all of these big feelings in your head and you are not able to, first of all, acknowledge them, and you don't identify them, the brain goes into alarm mode. And when you go into alarm mode, that means that you can't see the forest through the trees. You're not able to take in what your professor is saying to you in a lecture. You can't remember that your significant other told you that they needed to do X, Y, and Z, and you only hit X, and Y and Z were the most important parts of that list. So if you can name it, it helps you to process it, and it helps you then to be more present. And the last pillar is just having some downtime. A lot of students, especially in this game of high school and college admissions and kind of marketing yourself, they get into this thought process of, I have to be on all the time, 24/7. And in doing that, they deplete all of their resources. So again, scheduling a solid time in their schedule when they can set aside time to go mountain climbing, go for a run, read a book, knit, crochet, cook, write a poem, reach out to an old friend that you haven't talked to in a long time, or get together with your friends. During that period of time when they have downtime, that activates the DMN network, which is the default mode network. And that's when the brain starts to relax and can take in things like, can process memories and information and feelings. And that's even a great time for creativity. And, the DMN is a blessing and a curse for people who have ADHD, because on the one hand, it's like Candyland. There is so much creativity that goes on there. And that's frequently where they get locked in and lost and pulled off task. But it's also a rehabilitation tool and mechanism that we have in our brain to help us to recover from the rigors and the demands of the day. So if you can do those 5 things and create systems for yourself to put into place in high school and definitely in college, then college becomes a place where you're growing with these systems.
Yeah. And I love how they get more high level. You have hydration, which is pretty foundational. And then we get into emotional regulation, which one of the things I love that you brought that one up is because, there's more and more research coming out that procrastination, that's the word
Mhm.
probably you and I hear more than any other word right now, is
Right.
procrastination. We're finding procrastination is actually highly emotional, right? It used to be thought of as strictly a behavior. And so what you said with emotional regulation is just dead on. What I see with our students is when they're stuck in their head and their emotions are big, that's when procrastination occurs. I wanted to ask you about a system for emotional regulation. Is there anything you recommend, like a weekly routine, a weekly system around that to make sure you stay regulated?
I think one of the great tools that we talk about in the office is journaling, because and people roll their eyes and they say, "Oh, I don't want to write, I don't want to type." But you could do something that's just really bulleted and it can be really brief. Reflect on what were the 5 most challenging things of the day, what were the 5 most rewarding things, or what were the 5 things that you did that you were most proud of. Just sit there and do a brain dump. That's another thing that I have on the app, because it was so important and powerful to have this tool available to people. If you just set your timer for 1 to 3, even 5 minutes, and you write down every single thing that you have on your mind. If you're thinking about chocolate, write down chocolate. If you're thinking about Valentine's Day, the weather, no thought is insignificant. Just jot it all down. You could even dictate if you wanted to, because you don't want to write or type. And that can give you some insight into some of the things that are on your mind. And sometimes people have done this brain dump exercise and they say to me, I had no idea I was even thinking about these things.
Yeah.
And then you can start to dig into it if you want to a little bit more, to figure out, well, why are these things on my mind and what's the meaning behind them? And you're teaching yourself then, by just doing that exercise alone, to become more emotionally aware, which means that you can increase the likelihood of you becoming more stable, because now you know what this feeling feels like and how to process it, and then how to move on or get the help that you need to be able to process it.
Yeah, no, I like that. I'm the biggest fan of the brain dump. Every time we do it with students, you just get it all out. You see their shoulders drop. The brain
Yeah.
is for having ideas, not holding ideas. And the amount of anxiety that we see just kind of leave their system, just getting all the junk out. Even if you don't do, I mean, we recommend you do something with it, but even if you
Right.
don't do anything with it, like you just see their shoulders drop, they just feel so much better.
And I think, Brandon, what you just said is really important about, that the brain is a place to have ideas and not hold them, because it becomes so cumbersome to carry all that around with you.
Absolutely. And we all do it. And let me run a procrastination thing past you really quick. Because recently we've been recommending students when they're trying to procrastinate, instead of getting off on their device, getting off on their phone, they just sit. And it's almost like sitting in the fire a little bit, like it just burns. Just feel that feeling. And what we've seen is that's decreased procrastination. Is that similar with what you've seen and with the research?
Yeah, I think that, it feels really uncomfortable having some of these emotions. If there's, you and I, before we started talking, we're talking about research papers. I haven't met a kid who doesn't get overwhelmed by that. There's nobody who comes into my office and said, I am so excited about my research project. I cannot wait to get started. They don't know how to start. The initiation process is horrible for them. And then once they get past that hump, it's better. But some of them, the whole process is horrific. So becoming comfortable with being uncomfortable feels less threatening. If you can, it's kind of like if you have a personal issue with somebody, you will, in many cases, try to avoid that individual. But if you can, because you have to, maybe it's a boss, maybe it's a coworker, or, your brother or sister or whoever, if you can, first of all, start to feel comfortable with feeling uncomfortable, then all of that panic that comes with that discomfort starts to calm down, and you can start to think more clearly about, well, first of all, why do I feel uncomfortable about this? What can I do about it? What steps do I need to take? Who are the people I can turn to? And then that becomes less uncomfortable. And now you can take that and make a template out of it. So the next time you have to be writing a research project or doing whatever it was that made you feel uncomfortable, you can skip steps 1 to 16 of panic and chaos and just get to step 17, which becomes your new number 1, because now you know how to deal with the situation effectively.
And I love what you just said, especially for high school seniors, because parents are always terrified. And if I could sum this up into, concisely, if we can help them start to get comfortable being uncomfortable, because they're going to be uncomfortable a lot during this transition.
Oh, yes.
So what you just said, I think, is so spot on for this transition.
Yeah.
It's a great place to start if people are wondering, where do I start with all this? So yeah, I love that. I want to go to your last pillar. We've been talking a lot around here about the importance of rest. And we do it through this stress plus rest equals growth model. It's like you and I both are into athletics. If you lift weights, you go for a run, you're stressing your muscles out. If you don't rest them, you don't grow, right? And we're finding the attention, brain, the executive function skills are working the exact same way. So I love that you put those in. And I thought your recommendations were great. One of the things we recommend is going what I call into landscape mode. Is there any other ways to rest your brain versus getting from pinpoint? Like if you're spending a lot of time on the computer, is that the best way to do it?
Tell me a little bit about the landscape mode.
Yeah. So like when you're going for a walk and like you see the big picture, what we see right now is students are giving their brains a rest because they're like trying to type a paper and they're right to their phones, focusing. They're pinpointing their focus all day. Can you rest while still pinpointing your focus, or is it better to do something else?
That's a really good question. I think that there are ways to be, laser focused, but also build in those opportunities for, like, let's just take a pause here. You're working on, I'm going to beat this research paper to death, sorry, but you're working on a research.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I talk with my clients about, let's chunk it down. And so you're working on the first chunk, and then let's take a step back and just have some downtime. What does that look like? It could look like a walk. You could go run, you can shoot hoops, you can play with your cat, your dog, go talk to the hallmate down the hall, go get a snack, anything to sort of like break up what it is that you're doing, your attention and that need for intense focus, and then go back and start again. And by the way, before you left to take that break, you left yourself a little note or a hint as to where you're going to pick up. Because so many of my students say to me, Hannah, it's like Sisyphus when I start all over again. It's as if I never got that boulder up the hill and now it's back down again. So if you can sort of outsmart yourself, then by leaving a note as to where you want to pick up, that's something that just makes that transition back into the focus mode more seamless.
Yeah, good point. I always stop writing mid-sentence.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, because just with my ADHD, if I have to start a new sentence, but I'll purposely, when I'm done, I'll stop writing mid-sentence because I have a quick jump off.
That's
just,
awesome.
yeah, that's just what I've done. But no, I just want to say thank you for keeping that rest pillar, because that's the one when we talk to people, like that's the one that like nobody thinks of, and how instrumental that is. And we're all, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 like you're basically asleep, 10 means you've never focused so hard. We want to get 7, 8, 9 up there and then come back and rest. But we're all functioning at anxious 5 all day and then wondering why we can't remember information for the test.
Right. Exactly. And it's a very easy pillar to overlook, unfortunately.
Yeah. That's a great reminder. Tell me about self-advocacy. How do you help build these skills before the transition?
Hopefully they've been doing it before they got to high school, and parents can help with that by taking advantage of natural opportunities that come up. So, let's say that your fifth grader really wants to get together with a friend of theirs, but they're having a little bit of a tiff about, who got to play the video game first the last time. So you can do some role playing with your child and give them some key phrases and practice it with them so that they can then go to their friend and say, hey, let's work this out. That's a perfect simple example of learning self-advocacy. When they're in school as younger students, this can be, again, elementary school all the way through high school. There is going to come a day, unfortunately, when the material just does not make sense. Well, what doesn't make sense? Who should we go to for help? What should I be asking? How do I know that I got the help that I needed? And if it didn't work out, how do I pivot and go to somebody else who could help me? Those 5 things right there are a lifelong package that's going to help them for the duration of their life, because you need that in your family relationships. You need that in your professional relationships. Those are all things that are super helpful. Jump ahead to high school. When you are considering the schools that you're thinking about applying to, do your due diligence and figure out, first of all, what kind of support do I need, particularly for this neurodivergent population, or any other student who has needs that are, either a handicap or a health issue or whatever. Know what it is that you have in the way of your needs for support, and make sure that the schools that you are applying to can meet your needs. And then once you've figured out which schools you're going to apply to, have meetings with the offices of disability services or the academic support and find out with them, for a student with your profile, what would they be able to do for you? And you can tell them what it is that you have in place right now for your support in school, and obviously have a psychoeducational evaluation or whatever documentation you need to support that, and make sure that they can accommodate you. Those are all, big examples of self-advocacy. And then it's a little bit different once you get into the college environment.
Are you consistently coaching parents to let students take the lead on this?
Yes. And it's very difficult for parents. And I'll give you my transportation analogies or metaphors. There are three kinds of parents. There's the helicopter parent who just kind of hovers. There's the Black Hawk who lands, squarely on top of their heads. And then there's the submarine. And the submarine is the one that I try to encourage parents to start moving toward, because the submarine, you have what's going on your radar screen, but you're below water. You're paying attention. You're not saying anything, even though that means that you're biting your tongue until it bleeds, but you know what's going on. And when you see, that there's enemy fire coming, or that there's a reason to pop up and check in, or just to even take your kid's pulse, do that, have a conversation, and then go back down again. It doesn't do our kids any good if we are constantly hovering over them or telling them what to do or how to do it, because that denies them the opportunity to develop their sense of autonomy.
Yeah. Yeah. When I've listened to some of your podcasts and taken a deep dive into some of your work, you talk about outsmarting oneself. Can you tell me more about that?
So outsmarting involves, first of all, a significant degree of self-awareness. So for example, within the context of college student life, if you know, even if you, on your best day of sleep, you just are not a morning person, your brain is not waking up, you need to have your run around the campus or whatever it is, then as best you can, don't take classes in the morning. Schedule your class later in the morning or in the afternoon, or if you're a night owl, then take them at night. That's an example of outsmarting yourself. Obviously there are going to be times maybe where you have to take an early morning class because it's a requirement for your major. Okay, so we'll troubleshoot that. And if that's the case, then to outsmart yourself in that situation, you can make sure that the night before you are packing up every single thing that you need beforehand. We just described the fact that you are not a morning person. So maybe you bring a couple of high energy granola bars. You're definitely packing your water bottle. Everything is just ready to go, so that all you have to do is roll out of bed. Heck, I've had students wear their clothes to sleep at night. So they literally just have to roll out of bed, brush their teeth if we're lucky, grab the backpack and go. The other examples might be, if you know that you do better when it comes to studying in a place that has some background noise, then identify some of those places ahead of time and go to a library where, not in a quiet room, but go to a place where people are still chatting and creating some ambient noise in the background, or create your own ambient noise, create a playlist that's not going to disrupt your flow. Or work in a lot of the dorms now have study rooms where you can study and people are constantly going in and out, and if that's not going to disrupt you, great. If you, on the other hand, that you need dead silence, then go into the quiet room in the library and work there. Or if you know that you work better body doubling, where you're doing work with somebody, not necessarily the same task, but just having somebody physically present, then have a body doubling partner.
Love it. Talk about planning. We know planning is like a lead domino for time management, for prioritization. We see a lot of students that just when they step on campus, they have no idea how to plan. What strategies do you give for that?
So planning also involves a little bit of self-awareness, but it's more, I think that there's a misconception, Brandon, that planning is about, memorizing things and thinking ahead to the future, but it's really about setting up systems for yourself. So and there's a lot of overlap between what we just spoke about and planning, with the outsmarting. I've had students who have difficulty with things like remembering to put their retainers in or putting in their contacts or something like that, but they have no problem remembering to brush their teeth, which is a good thing. So I have them stack. We stack the retainer, we stack the contacts, and we stack the toothbrush, the floss, and the toothpaste all together in one location. So that when you go to grab that toothpaste, you're like, oh, right, I also have to do my contacts and I have to do everything else that's located there. Planning can also be, making sure that you have a regular routine. So that can be a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. This is what I'm doing this is what all my weekdays look like. Or it could be that every Monday I'm doing this routine, every Tuesday I'm doing this routine, and you schedule it out in either something like a planner, a hard copy planner, or something like my app that I have, or anything I have kids who put it up on a giant dry erase calendar. So they look at the week and they see, okay, Monday, this is what I'm doing. And after a while, they don't have to look at it anymore because it becomes a natural part of their existence.
Yeah, for some reason, the large calendars, those have really taken hold with a lot of college students, which has been interesting for me. Also, the other one we've seen is time blocking. When students can visualize, the more time they spend on screens, the more often they see their time. That just seems to be really helpful for them as well.
Yeah, and the color coding is also helpful too. They can take it as far as color coding each class in a different color, or they could just have all of their classes are in one color, their extracurriculars are in another color, professor meetings are in this color, maybe some of them work, so that's going to be in a different color, of family obligations, and just having that ability to make the distinction between what it is they're doing is super helpful.
Yeah. We've thrown a lot at families today. And
Yeah.
so I know that's a lot of information, and they probably are looking for more. Where can people find more of your work? And tell us more about your app as well.
So if they want to find out information about my practice, they can go to www.academically.com, the word academic followed by the hyphen sign, and then ally is ALLY.com. If they want to find out information about my book and my app, then they can go to mytoad, MYTOAD app.com. And the app is amazing. I'm so excited about it. We launched it over the summer. And it's very unique in the sense that there are so many wonderful apps that are out there, but they're all separate and disjointed. And the kids have to go out to the Notes app, or they have to go out to the Calendar app. This takes all of those things, all of those jobs, and puts it into one spot so that they can take anything that they need to do and put it together in this one area so that their flow is not disrupted. It helps with accountability. It helps with problem solving. We have an AI feature that is specific for problem solving. So you can go to it and it'll ask you, what's your mood, or what are your challenges that you're facing today? And just based on that, it will walk you through suggestions on how to use the app on that day. You can incorporate your, what I call SOS contacts, who are the people that you can incorporate from your phone into the app, so that I can reach out to you, Brandon, and I can say, hey, Brandon, I'm working on that research paper. And just wanted to let you know, because you and I both know that research shows that if you make a public announcement of what it is that you're doing, you're more likely to follow through on it. You can also ask them to check in with you to make sure that you did the job that you were setting out to do. It just has so many amazing features, and they're all based on the tools that I've used with thousands of individuals in my office. So I know it's life-changing. I also wrote a book about ADHD for kids who have ADHD, because I think it's really important for them to be heard and validated. A lot of the books that are out there are awesome, but they don't address and speak to this experience. And a lot of the parents now, and the coaches and other adults who are working with these kids, have a better understanding of what it's like to live with ADHD, and they're using this book as a handbook. So these are two amazing tools that I'm super excited about.
Thank you for all you've done for the field, and the app is phenomenal, and I highly recommend checking out the book as well. We'll have all of that in the show notes for links to those. So Hannah, Thank you so much for all you've done for us.
Thank you. And thanks for everything that you're doing for the community as well, Brandon. It's awesome.
Thank you for joining us on the Executive Function for All podcast. If today's episode brought you any value, please rate us 5 stars and share it with someone who may benefit. And remember, every small step you take builds towards your success. For resources and guidance, visit untappedlearning.com. Keep growing, keep learning, and we'll see you next time.